welcome to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him at gods5minutes@gmail.com. Now, here's Ed Wilson with God's 5 Minutes.
Hello, friends. Colossians 4:10 reads, Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, saluteth you, and Marcus, sister's son to Barnabas, touching whom ye received commandments. If he come unto you, receive him. This Marcus, whom we know more as Mark, is the man over whom Paul and Barnabas had conflict. The three had gone on a missionary journey together, but Mark had found cause to abort his travel with the others before the work was done. When the next time for a journey came, Paul was unwilling to spend the resources necessary to take along an unreliable comrade, whereas Barnabas insisted Mark should go. At last, the issue between them became so great they were obliged to part ways, and Paul marched on into the pages of Christian greatness, while Barnabas faded into relative insignificance. But clearly that was not the end of the story, for like so many in the annals of our holy religion, it was only a turn in the road, soon lost in the distance of forgiveness and rededication. In this verse we find Paul and Mark again together, and now with a strong connection between the apostle and his younger associate, so much so that Paul is able to provide the strongest of sanctions on Mark's life and commitment to the gospel. So let's see what we can learn. Mark was a full-blooded Jew when he started out to work for Christ. Like a great many other Jews of that time, he wore two names, one Jewish, John, and one Gentile, Mark. But as we trace him through the chronology of the Scriptures, we find less and less of John, and even of John Mark, the two forms of his name in which we first meet him in the Acts of the Apostles. It appears he cast aside his Hebrew name to be called only by his Roman one. And that change coincides with the fact that we find him sending so many Christian greetings across the sea to his Gentile brethren. On top of that, the gospel he wrote has come down through the centuries to us under his Gentile name, Mark. When we read it, we find many indications it was intended for a largely Gentile audience. In fact, the earliest traditions of the church hold it was written while he was in Rome and for Roman Christians. Thus, Mark is a solid example of the truth that the more a person becomes immersed in the redemptive wonders of the gospel, the more he will be freed from all cultural and racial differences, and become wholly and focused on divine love for souls and striving for eternal benefit as the greatest, purest objectives of life on earth. Now, this name change may seem like a very small thing and may have happened more or less as a matter of convenience, but it still points to a larger truth, which is that if we want to help people, the first requirement is to be willing to stand on their level and make ourselves one with them as far as we can. So, if we may put words in Mark's mouth, they would be, I put away the name that separates me from these Gentiles, to the redemption of whose souls I dedicate myself and whom I love, and take the name that binds me to them. After all, isn't that the very same principle that brought Jesus Christ down into our world to savor what we taste, grow weary with the paths that bruise our feet, and at last to feel the bite of the crucifying nails? For as much as the children were partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took the same that he might deliver them. With a simple evidence of this name change, we see this man, a Jew to his fingertips, for the sake of the efficiency of his work, lay aside what had been one of the dearest parts of his very life for an even greater blessing, to do a noble work. Another important lesson in this simple verse in Colossians point to the possibility of overcoming great failures. We don't know why Mark abandoned Paul once in the field, but here before us is proof positive recovery, one so firm it resulted in renewed trust. We may understand from these readings in Paul's writings that the confidence he placed in Mark fully restored him to the place as if he had gone faithfully with him in the original journey. Mark's example carries hope for everyone who has misstepped along the way. Have you talked to God today?
You have been listening to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him by email at godsfiveminutes@gmail.com. Tune in next time to hear more encouraging thoughts from God's Word on God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson.